Well, this next panel should be a fun one. This next presentation from Peter Greer, president of Hope International, I think will speak to a lot of our hearts and a lot of the heart of this particular project. It's a pleasure to introduce Peter. He's been a speaker on a couple of different panels that we've had here at AEI recently. Peter is a graduate of Messiah College and of the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. He is currently serving as CEO and president of Hope International. And he joined Hope in 2004. At the time that he came to Hope International, they were in 2 countries doing innovative microfinance, microenterprise lending work around the world. And today, just a decade later, they're in 17 countries and are a model to a lot of us working in this space. Peter previously served as managing director for Urwego, a Christ-centered microfinance institution in Kigali in Rwanda. He was also a technical advisor for the Self-Help Development Foundation in Zimbabwe and worked in Cambodia as a microfinance advisor prior to that. He is so fun to listen to because Peter's heart is in this work, and he's motivated by a humility that I think you'll hear right away, and an engagement and excitement with changing lives. He's co-authored The Poor Will Be Glad, Joining the Revolution to Lift the World Out of Poverty. He's co-authored Spiritual Danger of Doing Good, recently as well, Mission Drift, The Unspoken Crisis Facing Leaders, Charities, and Churches. And most recently, he has co-authored a book in the Rising Capitalism series called Entrepreneurship for Human Flourishing that will be out about a month from now. So please join me in welcoming Peter Greer.
All right. Well, it is great to be with you. Thanks for having me. And I have to say a couple things. First of all, you all invited, not just me, but you invited 4 of the Hope International interns this summer who were able to join us. So that's just the hospitality of AEI and Values in Capitalism. Last minute they said, of course there's room. Bring the interns. So super, super great to have some Hope interns. And so many of you, I love getting to college campuses and coming to an event like this and seeing so many friends. But I'm most excited that this isn't just a trip today, but I got to bring my 2 kids. And I don't know if you saw 2 of my 3 kids, but in the hallway, if they were here in this room, you would hear them. But thankfully, one of our wonderful interns went across the street and ended up taking them to the National Geographic Museum, which is super fun. So they're there, and we're making this like a whole man weekend with my boys. But this is just fun to have a few minutes. But I was thinking about that as I was driving because I think my son, Keith, has a gift of entrepreneurship that is unique, that I certainly didn't have when I was a kid. And I saw that because I try to find ways of bringing my family along in this journey. So it's not just daddy going away on trips, daddy going away overseas, but very much we see this as a family mission. We see this as a family calling. And so we ended up going to Rwanda. I ended up bringing my son, Keith, who now is 9 years old, and we arrived in Rwanda, and we ended up visiting micro-entrepreneurs. And so we went into these markets, and we ended up hearing stories about individuals that would have business ideas and then would start with small savings accounts, sometimes as little as 10 cents, and they would pool their savings, and then they would start investing in each other's businesses, and then they would grow their businesses. And so my 8-year-old son is watching these stories of entrepreneurship unfold right in front of him. And I had a series of meetings that I needed to go to attend to. So I'm in this meeting, and he says, Dad, can I go outside? And can I go outside and play with some of the kids? And of course I said, sure, that would be great. So he's outside. I see him through the window, and I see him start to like bend down, and he's collecting something. At the end of the time, it turns out that when the meeting was over, he came and he had collected 3 bags of beans from a field that had already been harvested. And I thought that's kind of a cool thing that he has ended up spending his time collecting beans. But when we got back to the capital city of Kigali, he said, Dad, I've got my beans. I've got to go to the market so I can sell them. And I said, Keith, no, like we're helping other people start businesses. And he's like, why, Dad? Like, I got my beans. I don't want to bring them home. I got to sell my beans. So sure enough, we went to the market, walked down, we went to the first stand, and this guy had like a mound of beans. He had like a huge basket of beans, but Keith thought maybe he needed a few more. So we went up and said, I've got my beans. Would you like to buy my beans? And the guy, we went back and forth, and he was like, no, I got plenty of beans. I don't need them. And part of me as a dad was like, oh, crushed. Just buy the kids beans, please. But the other side of me was like, phew, now at least we can go home. And Keith said, there's got to be another market. So we ended up asking about, is there another market? And we found one. It was about a half a mile away. In this, there were multiple shops. So he didn't just have one person to go to, but he saw a guy who was selling pineapples and had a big smile. And when I lived in Rwanda several years before, my Rwanda name was Mzungu Chane Chane. That means the whitest of the white man. And so, I'm already standing out. And here I am and my son, and we're already a spectacle in this Rwandan market. And we're even more of a spectacle when we show up, and here's my son with his 3 bags of beans, selling them in a Rwandan market. And this man with the pineapples and a big smile bought my son's beans. And I was so, come on, clap for that man who I love. I love that man. But not only that, this is what killed me. After he bought the beans, my son took the money in his hand, took the money that he had, and he said, hey, Dad, go buy yourself a donut, and gave me part of the profits. But not only that, he appreciated the help that I provided him. But not only that, he said, Dad, let's go back to that first guy. Let's buy more beans, let's put them in bags, and let's come back and sell them again. Over the next 3 days, every time we weren't in meetings, we were selling beans in a Rwandan market. I took my son to Akagera Game Park. We were looking at giraffes. Keith looks at me and says, Dad, are we going to be home in time before the market closes? Like, Keith, we're looking at giraffes, and you want to go sell beans in a Rwandan market? And he was like blown away at this potential that he had. There was something in him with like an entrepreneurial drive that I've never seen. Something in him that like it just was unleashed in a Rwandan market. Not only that, when he came back to the States, he ended up going to the supermarket, buying beans, finding out people didn't want to buy beans as much here in the U.S., so he ended up buying jars, putting the beans in the jars, putting a candle in them, and selling bean candles. And if he were here right now for $5, you could walk away with a bean candle. But isn't that awesome? Isn't that just so cool? I don't know about you, but growing up, that's not how my mind naturally worked. It's not something that I would originally think about doing, but I think it is beautiful. When I hear stories of entrepreneurship, I want to celebrate them, and I want to tell people about the bean salesman, the 8-year-old bean salesman in Rwanda, because I think in that simple story, we see what the potential is. Believe it or not, over the next 3 days that he was in Rwanda, he made a significant living wage as an 8-year-old boy by buying and selling beans. And I think that's pretty cool. When we got back from Rwanda, we had a Rwandan family that has kind of adopted our family. And their son, Mucho, he ended up realizing that as he would go to school and he would have these Rwandan donuts, the same ones that my son let me buy in Rwanda with the profit that he made from his business, Mucho realized that in his high school there was a desire for Rwandan donuts, that when he would bring them in, people would be excited about it. People would want to eat them. And so he ended up taking orders, getting paid up front, and ended up in one day making $60 selling Rwandan donuts in his high school before the principal told him he wasn't allowed to sell things in school. But that notwithstanding, in one day he made $60 selling Rwandan donuts. It doesn't matter if it's an 8-year-old American going to Rwanda. It doesn't matter if it is a 15-year-old Rwandan coming to America. There are opportunities all around us. The chair that you are sitting in was the idea of an entrepreneur. The table that you are in, the glass that you have, the water that you are drinking, the lights that we see, the microphones that we're using, Everything around us is a story of entrepreneurship. Everything around us is a story of someone seeing a need and having the ability to create value and to fill that need. There are stories of creative entrepreneurship all around. And here's the problem that I have. Those simple stories, even though I grew up in the church, every time we talked about people who were doing good, we never heard those stories. We heard two types of stories. We heard about missionaries and we heard about doctors. And growing up, when I saw the slideshows of doctors taking growths off individuals, I went to the back of the room and literally passed out. I get queasy at needles. And so, like, as a kid, that's my image of if you want to go and help someone, this is the way you do it. It was a really small lens to look through. And it was a lens that when I looked through it, I didn't see myself. And so I thought there's no place for me in the business of helping others. I don't know about you, but I believe that that still is the prevailing idea for too many people. That if you want to help someone, there is a very small, limited number of options that you have if you want to be in the business of helping others. I want to tie some dynamite around that idea, and I want to see it exploded. I recently have had the chance to have some conversations with Shane Claiborne at some college campuses. One, I believe, was right here, right? Wasn't that the very first one that we had here at AEI? And then we ended up having a conversation at Messiah College and having a number of ones. And it's fascinating. It is fascinating. After every single one of those conversations, the simple thing that I have heard more than any other was, I never knew. I never knew you could care about other people and be so excited about business and capitalism and commerce. I never knew you could be into helping others and be into business. That's when I want to tie TNT around and explode that idea. And it's interesting because I am full-time in the business of a nonprofit Christian ministry. And yet in my life, I have come to the simple conclusion that if you want to help others, especially if you want to help those who are in financial poverty and all the problems that are caused by that, instead of seeing business as the enemy or some evil that needs to be accommodated or put up with so that we can have some money to give away to the poor, I believe that we need to see business as the very center of the bullseye of every single project of how we help those in poverty. I was hoping in this group I'd get like a amen or a clap or something on that. But I believe that. And I want to figure out, how do we tell that story? How do we tell that story to a wider audience? That's why I'm so excited what is happening in this place, because I believe this is one of the unique places where that story is getting told. But I still believe that you, because you're here, you are an anomaly. You are not the majority thought. And as simple as it is to say, if you care about someone in poverty, care about having them in a job so they're not in poverty anymore, as simple as that phrase is, I still don't believe that is the common direction, that is the common belief of so many people, and we've got to figure out a way of changing that. What I would like to do is to maybe think about a different way of doing it. Maybe think about 3 steps. Maybe think about 3 steps to equip you to have the conversation about these issues and maybe help your friends come to a different conclusion. First point, throw all of your language of capitalism and the free market out the window and reframe the argument about caring for others. Point number 1, the language that we use, it alienates people. And when we talk about an economic system, there's so much baggage that comes for good reason. There's so much baggage that comes that people can't hear the message that we have. Point number 1, throw all our language, throw out all our jargon, throw out all of our systems, throw out all of our famous economists that we look up to, throw all of that out the window and start the conversation with, I am for people. I am for people. I care about people. And from a faith perspective, my goodness, we of all people have that as the very foundation. When Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? People were trying to say, of all these rules, what's the greatest commandment? What was his response? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. We know that. The foundation is one of love. And I believe we need to frame the conversation in language of love that says, I see the needs of the world. My heart breaks for that. I see that people don't have enough food for their children. My heart breaks for that. I see hopelessness and despair all around the world. And if your eyes are not seeing that, then open them a little wider, because there is so much hurt, there is so much pain, there is so much poverty around the world. Let your eyes be open to that. Let your heart respond to that, and start the conversation saying, I'm for people. I want to love people. I want their best. When we start the conversation like that, we find a common ground, because I don't know anyone that would start the argument on the other side saying, well, I'm not for people, right? I don't care about others. Maybe there are those people, but unfortunately, those sorts of people, unfortunately, too often are lumped into this room. People that somehow have forgotten that of all of these conversations, there's a human dimension, there is human suffering. Let's identify that as the starting point. Let's relate to people on a common ground of we are for people. We want what's best to them. Point number 2, we have enough data, we have enough stories that show that too often the way that we go about helping actually hurts. There is more and more writing. There is more and more data that is showing that this is a common story. My story, I started my international work in Haiti. And Haiti is a country that has received more per capita aid than any other nation on earth. And if aid were the solution, then Haiti would be the poster child of flourishing. And we know we have a friend here from Haiti, and I can tell by your smile that oftentimes we know that there's not a correlation between our desire to do good and the results that follow. My first trip to Haiti was a traditional trip. I ended up having 13 high school students that I was assigned, never been to Haiti, and show up at the airport, end up getting this car, and I'm told I need to drive this car. So all the students are in the back with these 2 benches on the back, just open air, and I get in the driver's seat, and it's stick shift. I've never driven stick shift. So I learned how to drive stick shift in Haiti with 13 high school students in the back. Honking, it was a mess, and my apologies to anyone, it was not a place that I wanted to learn how to drive. We ended up getting to the community, we ended up working in an orphanage, we ended up doing everything that we knew to help, and one of the things that we did is we had packed our bags with stuff, packed our bags that were generously supported by friends and by family members that saw the need and wanted to respond. And as we showed up in this community, we had a list of everyone that we were going to help. Everyone that we were going to help. It looked so organized on paper. And yet when a group of Americans roll up in a community that has been the recipient of long-term charity, they know how this story goes. And it wasn't just the families that were on the list. It wasn't just those folks that were the ones that we were trying to help. It was a massive amount of people. And as we unpacked our goods, it was a riot scene of just the strong pushing down the weak. And looking back, we did so many things wrong in how we did it. But if you've done charity work for long enough, you know that model that sounds so good and that we tell about, that we're going to go and help others. We're going to solve their problems. We're going to go and give our stuff away. A couple things you realize pretty quickly. One, there's never enough. There's never enough in a model of redistribution. Never enough. Number 2, there never is something that causes people to realize that they have what it takes already in their hands. It causes a paternalistic approach to poverty alleviation where we feel good about what we've done, and it actually only heightens the power dynamics where those of us who are in the position of giver think more highly of ourselves. Those people who are in a subordinate position of constantly receiving actually are forced into greater poverty. It's interesting that the poverty dynamics is beyond financial. There was a study that was done by the World Bank, and it asked 60,000 individuals all around the world to define poverty. And it was interesting, when you asked that question to a North American audience, they would define poverty is lack of money, $1.25 per day. They would say lack of stuff, not having adequate housing. They'd say lack of food. It was a material definition of poverty. When you ask individuals that are living in financial poverty how they describe poverty, you know what words they use? Shame, voicelessness, powerlessness, an empty heart. Now, if you understand that that's their definition of poverty, and you show up with your short-term team and you give stuff away, what does that do to someone who has felt voiceless? Well, they didn't even ask me what I need. They don't even know my name. What does it do for someone who feels shame? I can't care for my kids. I have to wait for someone else to care for my kids. What does it do for someone who feels a sense of hopelessness, like life is never going to get better, only makes it worse? What does it do for someone that already feels like they just don't know what to do? They don't have anything to give. It just reinforces that. That's why the prevailing model of charity is always going to be found lacking. For that and a whole lot of other reasons, that a model that goes in and says, let us do for you, let us come in and solve your problems, any model that has us in the lights and on the center stage is going to sabotage our ability to actually see long-term results. Point number 2, through stories and through stats, the traditional model of charity that is good in a response to a crisis keeps people on their knees in a position that love says, I wouldn't want to be like that. And if I wouldn't want to be like that, why wouldn't we want better for the people that we're serving? Number 1, frame our discussion in terms of love. We are for people. Point number 2, realize through data and through stories that a model of just redistribution, of just handouts, of just traditional charity, it's never enough. And then number 3, tell a story of what's happening in our world during our lifetime. The story that doesn't get enough headlines is that poverty is being eradicated faster now than at any point in the history of the world. Right now, as we are living, there is a whole lot of good news. And there are some unlikely voices that are singing the song. First unlikely voice is Bono from U2. I love Bono. I'm not even a closet U2 fan. When I was in high school, we went to Toronto. I had classes the next morning at 8 a.m., but we were able to get there through a monsoon to Toronto to rock with U2, back for class at 8 a.m., been to Foxborough Stadium to see them. They're just a great band. But one of the things that I've appreciated is not just their awesome music, but the other thing that I've appreciated is Bono is a rock star with a conscience. And if you hear what Bono has said, he has been someone who had a voice. He had a very large platform. He had a megaphone, and he used that megaphone to awaken people to the cause of the world. And that started for him in Ethiopia when he went over and saw the famine. And he was founded at that point of seeing the famine, and he said, we've got to do something. And so he was involved in Live Aid. He was involved in giving, and this is in the early 90s. He just continued and continued and continued. But the song that he sings today isn't just the one campaign. It's not just let's give more money. The song that he's singing today is this. He said recently, I'm a rock star preaching capitalism. You hear that? This is Bono, the one who's been like at the forefront. I'm a rock star preaching capitalism. Sometimes I hear myself and I can't believe it. Aid is just a stopgap. Entrepreneurial capitalism is taking more people out of poverty than aid. Entrepreneurial capitalism is taking more people out of poverty than aid. That is the poster child of the aid movement, saying there's a better way to help the poor. Aid is just a temporary stopgap. Entrepreneurial capitalism is a far better way to help the poor. It's interesting that he is someone who's founded in data. The Brookings Institute, The Economist, Yale University have all reported recently about the incredible progress that is happening that is behind Bono's statements. In 1981, 52% of the world was living in extreme poverty. Half, 1 out of 2, was living in extreme poverty. By 2005, that number had been cut in half by 20 to 26%. 2011, that rate is 15%. Do you realize that? That is like really good news. And I've been traveling. I took my, ever since I graduated from Messiah College, I have been working internationally, and I am seeing this. I am seeing that the progress, although not universal, there is incredible progress that is happening right now within our lifetime. And when you look at the data and when you hear stories that are based in progress, it's not because of aid. It's not because of that. It's because markets are opening up and entrepreneurs are rising. Entrepreneurs who realize, just like my 8-year-old son, that they've got something in their hands. They've got something that they can do. And even if they have very little capital, they can go collect bags of beans and find a way of selling them. It's stories of a 15-year-old who's making donuts and selling them in his high school. It's all of these stories all around us that are only taking root. It's not just that, but then it's those individuals becoming job creators, and it's investors that are coming in and doing more and doing more, and then growing, not just from the small, not just from the micro, but to the medium. Large enterprises are creating massive employment all around the world based on a country or a nation's what their competitive advantage is. I am so excited to be living at this moment in history, and so excited to be here with all of you. We've got to find a way of telling a story rooted in people, eyes open to the inadequacies of the past, and then a message of hope of what is best for people. And I believe, simply stated, that a job is always going to be far better than a handout. What I want to do is just show you a real quick video of what this looks like for hope, based in the country of Zimbabwe, a country that has had a whole lot of troubles. And even in a place like Zimbabwe, there are stories of hope that are happening at the very, very base and grassroots level. Then I'd love to see if you guys have any other questions. I'm happy to talk much more about the microfinance model, which is kind of where I spend my time, if that would be interesting to you. But hopefully this can now transition into a discussion among us. So thanks.
You know, for generations now, the church locally here in Zimbabwe and around the world has looked at poverty and thought that the solution was very simple. You walk into somebody's life who has all of that immense lack, and you provide. And in that process, as you give someone everything that they're lacking, the message you don't know that you're speaking, but which speaks so loudly and clearly to that person's heart, is you are incapable. You cannot care for yourself. The role that you believe you were born with, to be a mother, a father, a provider for a family, you actually are incapable of completing. I think there's another alternative, and Central Baptist Church has found that alternative in partnering with Hope to start these savings groups, so that instead of walking into a family's life and saying you're incapable and you cannot, what these savings groups do is they come in and communicate with training and with mentorship and in community, that God has already given people the gifts and the skills and the talents and the hard work necessary to pull their families out of poverty.
Upenyu wangu wemwepedzi wawo wakaoma kosi ndakabva kumusha kwangu kumasvingo, saka ndabva ikoko ndarohwa ndabviswa mazino apa ndarepwa vesapoti group obva ndoendesa pakiriniki ndobva ndanotestwa ndobva ndanzi positive kuti akwanisawo kuwachengeta musi uyoyo akwanisa atadzawo atadzi, saka murume vakangonzwa kuti ndozvandiri akabhatisa. saka pandakazobudawo muchitungusa hospital 2008 chikafu vanhu vaimbopiwa nechristian care kwakusisina saka pandakabuda vanhu vaichengeta vana udzwawo nomumwe mukadzi ane crashes vanonzi mother chipepa ndobva vati vadiwo mamboendawo central baptist pamwe mungabatsirwa ndopatakazotanga kuona pastor Tom namai mugocha vobva vatidzidzisazve ndasunungurwa trust pakutanga ndaitofunga kuti vanhu ava vari kutidzidzisa izvo vanofunga kuti mari yacho ndine vala kupi ndisina kana pekutangira.
The average in Zimbabwe for these savings group is about 18 members who come together. They learn how to save their money into one central pot. And so what that looks like is that each week when they come together, each person brings a predetermined amount of savings. And they put that into a central pot. They've been taught how to keep books. And so they're learning how to do accounting. They're learning how to do simple charts. They're keeping track of each person's savings. And then out of that pot of savings, they're able to give each other loans. And as they receive loans, they're able to make bulk purchases, then to go start a business and sell something in the market, or buy chickens that then lay eggs that they can sell. And so the money that previously people thought they didn't even have is now becoming a productive asset in their own lives and in the community.
Saka patakatanga ndobva tatanga kungoita ndobva ndazoitawo mukana through madrum ndobva tapiwa magarden nead ndichiri kuenda kuchechi ikoko ndaingonamata ndichingonamata saka ndakazoona murume wanga angodzoka ndakangosvika apa hamba ndichitobvawo garden saka ndoda kungotenda Mwari nepurogiramu yakadai nekuti zvechokwadi ndakasunungurwa pamweya pari zvino nemurume wangu wacho tese takutoendawo Central Baptist sefamily asi nekuda kwekunzwa shoko ndakaregerera.
These men and women who used to be dependent on handouts, now every week when they come together are saving together far more than they ever used to receive in handouts. And that's been in just a year's time.
It's always hard to get like the first question, so I brought books to give away for anyone who asked the first few questions. For free. Handouts. No, you're working for them. You're working for them.
My name is Sarah Slater, and I'm from Houghton College. And I, as a business and international development double major, I feel I have found myself caught between the language of the two disciplines, which sometimes don't even respect or give each other a hearing. So I definitely identify with what you've been saying. But do you think that beyond micro-enterprise and sort of specialty fair trade businesses like coffee and jewelry, or clothing, which are some of them, do you think there is a place in the marketplace for socially responsible supply chains, for the things that you were pointing out, that all of the things that we buy that are entrepreneurial made, but maybe not made under conditions that are great for the people who are making them?
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. My parents went to Houghton and were married Letchworth State Park. So wonderful memories of Houghton, middle of nowhere, but it's a beautiful spot when you get there. I do love it there. Yeah, no, that's a great comment. And you know, a couple terms that I think are good temporary terms that we might need right now that I hope we don't need in the future. Term number one, social enterprise. Every enterprise has the potential to be social. Every single one. Every single opportunity where people are given a job by a responsible employer is a social enterprise. Fair trade. I hope that there's a day when that term isn't required, because to survive, you've got to assume that you're taking care of the folks and providing jobs already. That's a great way of helping people. So I actually think, and even like micro-enterprise and all of these things that somehow are still, it's kind of like they're in a buffer zone, that it's almost like you have nonprofit, but then you have social enterprises, and then you've got these other businesses. And I guess I want to blur the lines to actually say, from the grassroots up to the large multinational corporations, I want to see responsibility. I want to see organizations where people care about their employees, and I want to see that done, because if an organization doesn't care about you, you have enough options to go get a job somewhere else where a company is going to do that. And I guess I want to see all of business framed in a different way, with the potential to do a whole lot of social good. And so that's the fun project that I really am so grateful for Josh and Tyler and Meredith, but so grateful. The book that we've been working on that comes out next month, Entrepreneurship for Human Flourishing, what we try to do that is to basically look at the micro, the medium, and the large and say there's a role for all of them in unleashing human flourishing. All have the potential for great good. And so value chain, I mean, all of those things I believe are necessary pieces. Let's tear down the hierarchy that is unhelpful, and let's say, what are you good at? What are you gifted at? And let's make sure you're involved in that place without feeling like you're a second-class citizen or have a less noble calling if you decide to go work for a large organization and someone else goes and serves with a local nonprofit somewhere around the world. Those two are not inherently, one is not inherently better than the other. Both have incredible potential to care for the poor, to care for all people, and to do good. Sorry, I promised you a book.
My name is Grace Pio, and I'm from Wheaton College. You talked about the traditional model of aid and how that's not really effective in terms of giving handouts, but every year there are billions of dollars spent both from governments through the UN as well as more traditional models for charity. So what do you view as the future, I guess, for the more traditional model of aid?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting. Bill Easterly's book, White Man's Burden, or Dambisa Moyo's book, Dead Aid. I mean, there's a lot of folks that have written about that. And I mean, Bill Easterly's book, it's just fascinating. The one graph where he charts the percent of aid as a country's gross domestic product on one, and then he looks at the growth per capita on the other. And it's kind of this X, this beautiful X between 1970 and 2000, showing that as aid was dramatically increasing, growth actually descended into negative territory. And there are a lot of people that read that, and I believe an unhealthy conclusion is that all aid is bad. And I guess that's kind of like we're people who like to live on opposite sides of a pendulum, and there's probably more nuance that's needed, and even probably in my comments today, there's probably more nuance that's needed. I'm not against aid. I'm not against governments trying to figure out how to help. I just believe we can, if we understand that business is the goal, we're going to be dissatisfied with anything. Someone having a job is the goal. That's the best pathway out of poverty. It's the only pathway out of poverty, is to let someone have a job. Everything else then, if it's looked at through that lens, the question is, does that help that? Does that incentivize that? Does that actually do more to accomplish that goal? Or does that create a system that ultimately erodes that ending point? So if we're clear about that ending point, then we have a different way of using language. And we would look at food aid differently. We would say, if someone is growing food in that country, my goodness, isn't that a better way to actually build the infrastructure in that country instead of just taking surplus goods from other parts of the world? I would say that's a better solution if it's with the goal of how do we meet the current need but also empower individuals. So I guess that's kind of the way that I'd look at it, is be clear about our definition of success, and then let's figure out the best way to get there. Yeah.
All better? Hey, sorry, I'm Peter Hodge from Bryan College. Regarding Gary Haugen's latest work on
The locust effect.
Correct, that one, yeah. Would you think that poverty will continue to decline, or do we need more protection, as he states? What would you say? Because we got, dramatic, amazing improvement in the past 30 years with poverty. Will that stop? Will that flatline? Will that continue? What do you think we need?
I think we need some creative people to be absolutely dissatisfied until that's all gone. So I don't see any reason why 15% is now okay. It's better. It's not good enough. I want flourishing for all people. And when you're living on less than $1.25 per day, that does not allow you to flourish. And when you don't have a way of using your gifts, that doesn't allow you to flourish. And so I think, again, about the connection between rule and law. On my, I love Haiti, and I am so excited about Hope's church-based work in Haiti. There are so many hardworking Haitians that are doing incredible things despite the circumstances. I'm incredibly optimistic when I meet individuals in Haiti. But you can't miss the connection between rule of law and investment. You just can't miss that. My last trip, after having one of the most mind-blowing experiences, like so positive, we were out in Kajak, and it was like so exciting to see these stories and to see transformation, to see investment, to see those stories like Fadzai, like you just saw, to see them taking root, to see people thinking about the future and investing differently. And then as we were on the road back to Port-au-Prince, there was a roadblock, and we tried to go around a roadblock, and that's a bad idea to try and go around a roadblock. But we had someone from the local community that said, no problem, I know these people, it's not a problem at all. So he got in, and we took a side road, and as we're going down the side road, you ever get that eerie feeling like something is about to happen? It got quiet, driving along, and then all of a sudden, just shouting, screaming, people on the road, like coming towards us. One individual pulled a pistol, cocked it, like running at our car, screaming. And when you have a situation like that, if you're an investor, that scares away investors. Maybe that's an understatement. It scares away everyone, right? And yet it was a situation that it was just such, like, my heart broke, actually. And my heart didn't break for me. I was fine, and we ended up, and they actually, it was interesting, they weren't mad at us. They were mad at the driver for breaking the roadblock. So the gun that was pointed, they were mad at us for being passengers, but they were more mad that someone within their community was finding a way to break the roadblock. You don't break community like that. And yet in that situation, as I drove away, as we were okay, my heart sank. Because I realized, like, that, if that is the way that it still works, if there's not some basic rule of law, then it's going to be so hard for someone to invest in that country, and you're never going to attract foreign direct investment, and you're always going to be reliant on aid that is not going to be all that unleash all the potential that's there. I find it so interesting between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. I find that interesting, and I find North Korea and South Korea. I find those two places to be the most fascinating. Because I don't know about you, but I kind of bought Jared Diamond, Guns, Germs, and Steel, kind of his core argument, and looking at geography as having this massive influence, and that certainly plays a role. But I tell you, I've been on some beautiful beaches in Haiti, and I've been on some beautiful beaches in the Dominican Republic. North Korea, South Korea, in 1975, North Korea had a higher per capita output than China. Both North Korea and South Korea were about the same in terms of productivity. And we know the story today. South Korea, Samsung, LG, Hyundai. North Korea, Dennis Rodman. I mean, it's just not even close of what those two are. And they're similar geographies, similar people groups, and same with Haiti and Dominican Republic. And certainly, you cannot ignore the rule of law and how critical that is. Decreasing violence, there absolutely is a connection to that with investment. So I applaud the work that Gary and the IJM team is doing. I applaud the work that individuals in USAID are doing to help reform laws that have to do with how difficult it is to start a business. Hernando de Soto, the mystery of capital. I applaud people that are working to make it easier for entrepreneurship to flourish. So there's a lot of pieces, and I guess sometimes we get in trouble when we show up, and if I came up here and just told you about microfinance, I feel like that wouldn't be helpful to this group that has diverse abilities and diverse interests. if I just came up and talked about rule of law. I feel like that would not be right with this group, because the reality is poverty is not one-dimensional and the solutions are not going to be one-dimensional. There is a interconnectedness between all sorts of things, and a bunch of different approaches are going to be necessary to really see progress happening. And again, I of any book that I've read that kind of clearly lays this out, I sure have appreciated Money, Greed, and God. I just thought the last chapter where he kind of summarizes the entire kind of what's necessary for progress to happen. Jay Richards, it's just a fantastic, fantastic read.
Hi, so you had mentioned that when asked, those living in poverty define poverty as in more a way as a mentality. I've heard that before as well, and so I was wondering if you could speak to maybe what Hope International does in kind of jump-starting people's confidence in their own ability, because I know that that mentality can be very self-defeating, right. And I mean, nothing will happen unless they have that belief that they can do it. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah. So a staff member just came back from India, and one of the questions that she asked was to a group of women that she was meeting with, and she said, like, how do you hold on to hope? And through the translator, they went back, and the question was like, hope, like, I don't know what that is. I don't even, like, what you're describing. I don't have that. I don't know that's not a concept that I'm familiar with. And in a situation like that, where someone absolutely has no image of themselves, not really been given the ability to dream about the future, all of these other things and all of these other tools cannot start without a changed worldview oftentimes. And so the question is, how do you change a worldview? And can I just be frank? I applaud USAID. I applaud a lot of groups. I want to spend my life not just doing poverty alleviation, not just doing entrepreneurship. At Hope and everything that I want to do in my life, I want to do it within a Christian perspective. I want to do it with Christ and the message of transformation that happens when we understand that we're created by a God with purpose. This is not some random wiring of the universe. There's a God who knows you. There's a God who loves you. There's a God who is for you. I love that is the very core, because when we know that, when we actually don't just know that, but when we believe that, our whole world changes. And there are some worldviews that would say that you were created to be an excrement collector, and that's what you want to do in life. And I believe that that's not true. That's not the story. That's not the big story that I believe in. I believe there is far more purpose than that, not this fatalistic approach to the world. And so I believe that oftentimes when we do our work, our very model, and again, just maybe a quick word at what we do at Hope to address that, the way that we do it is framing the very tools that we provide. So our model, whether it's the church-based savings and credit associations or whether it is the formal microfinance institutions, the question is, what happens when the staff member shows up? So Hope International, with our staff and network, there's about 1,400 employees globally that are showing up in communities all over the world. And when they show up, they go through 5 W's. We wanted to make it simple and memorable when they show up. So they show up in the community, and with this group that have self-selected in, they have opted in, they've said, we want to be a part of that. There's a time of welcome. We want people to feel loved and special and cherished right from the beginning. There's a time of worship. We sing a few songs. We end up praying for each other. And it's beautiful what happens when you realize you're not alone, that other people are praying for you and asking, how are you doing with that? Then there's a time, the Word. And oftentimes it's just reading a chapter out of the book of John, just learning this story, this amazing story of Jesus. And then the work happens where the training and facilitation and loans are repaid and loans are given and repaid. And then there's a wrap-up, a chance to say, what are we going to do differently this week as a result of what we've just experienced? That simple 5W is far more than a financial transaction. You can get a financial transaction increasingly on your cell phone, and I don't think that's going to change the world. And candidly, I think that the microfinance movement went wrong when they thought the only thing that the world needs is access to a small loan. I don't believe that. It's that within a broader context where it's not just the financial capital, but social capital is being established. Groups of people coming together, cheering for each other, investing in each other, and a worldview changed that comes from a different story, a different narrative that I think is the most incredible story this world has ever known. Yes.
Hi, my name is David Zhang. I'm a fellow at Global Development Enterprise in Washington, D.C., and also a recent graduate from Houghton College. And also, I'm South Korean, so it's kind of cool to hear that story.
Awesome.
So my question is that the title of this time is called Entrepreneurship for Human Flourishing. But could you please talk to us a little bit more about human flourishing in terms of, not only in terms of financial alleviation or improvement, but also in terms of like other implications?
Yeah. Yeah, great.
And actually,
No,
I know that I'm the fourth person to ask questions, so I don't get the book, but can I get your business card afterwards?
Anyone can have that. Just hopeinternational.org or Greer at hopeinternational.org. All right, great. No, well, fantastic. And please correct anything that I said about South Korea then in your northern neighbors. So the definition of terms, I really appreciate the question. And a lot of that was perhaps embedded in without being explicitly stated. And I would recommend this book that comes out next month called Entrepreneurship for Human Flourishing. Maybe that's number 4. Can that be his gift, Tyler? Can that be his gift? All right, great. Give your business card to Tyler. Great. Because in that we do go into a little bit more detail of what is human flourishing and what does that actually look like. And I actually think the best description of human flourishing is actually to go back to something that Bryant Myers wrote in Walking with the Poor, in understanding kind of what's the problem that we're trying to solve. And Bryant Myers has these 4 dimensions. And so the 4 dimensions, which he doesn't use these words, but I believe are necessary for human flourishing, these 4 domains. One is a relationship with God, understanding who we are with purpose. Second thing is the relationship with community. We are not isolated. We are in community. We are best when we're together. Hope is best experienced. Life is best experienced when we are rooted in community. There's also a changed view of ourselves, and our time horizon changes from just today. Flourishing doesn't happen when we are so preoccupied with right now that we have no ability to imagine and dream and actually hope about something that's to come. And then for us, it's kind of the financial and I guess there's a 5th dimension, the environmental piece as well. So I believe that there's multiple dimensions to human flourishing that we need to understand it in a whole. And I have seen too many people that are really wealthy, really, really wealthy. And they are isolated, they are alone, and every person that talks to them has an agenda about how they can get their money. And I believe that's not human flourishing, even though it has a whole lot of money with it. There can be a lot of isolation. There can be a lot of loneliness in the midst of massive wealth. And so, again, I just like that broader definition of what human flourishing is. I want to be sensitive to my time, Josh. It's 4:30.
Hi, my name is Daniel Talbot from Westmont College. So culture is comprised of narrative, behavior, and objects, simply. And knowing that different behaviors differ according to culture, I was kind of curious to know how Hope International goes about contextualizing your business model with microfinancing. So if you can share some thoughts on that, that'd be excellent.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. You know, the places that we work, so we work in 17 countries. We were founded in Ukraine, in Zaporozhye, Ukraine, expanded throughout the country, and now very diverse places. You heard Haiti, you heard Rwanda, Burundi, Malawi, Democratic Republic of Congo, Philippines, India, China, Peru. I mean, so we're really kind of a number of different contexts that maybe at the surface look very, very different. Culturally, look completely different. And yet I would say that in our experience, I have yet to find a place that there is not the opportunity and there are not people who want to work, people who have the capacity to work, and seeds of entrepreneurship that are already taking root in those countries and those contexts. So the idea of our model saying we want to invest in the dreams of those living in financial poverty. There's not a place that I've found that there are not investment opportunities in the dreams of those people that are caught in financial poverty. I also think there is not a place on earth, Washington, D.C. to Bujumbura. I mean, there's not a place also that doesn't need a deeper sense of hope as well. And so those are the constants. Whether we do solidarity group lending or whether we do traditional lending, group size differs, loan size differs, the way that we interact differs. Our core back-end processes are largely the same. Our accounts payable, our internal audit function, those things can be done same. We want a same chart of accounts because it's easier when we consolidate, except even there we have to do a little bit different based on central bank regulation. So there certainly are like differences, but the core model of what we're trying to do, I believe, to bring entrepreneurial commerce within a Christian or Christ-centered perspective, I have yet to find a place where that model is not incredibly valuable. Thanks for the great work you all are doing. Keep going.